because no one wants to go bankrupt and no one wants to be in a desperate situation. I actually purchased this camera at a very bad time in my career last year, around August and September. For some reason, my Sony recorder and lav mic failed me, so I'm re-recording the audio. I just finished a 3-day shoot with this camera, and it fits in my low pro backpack that I've had forever. It also fits into my doctor bag, but I find it impressive that this camera package can fit into this backpack, which makes it more versatile and easy to transport from job to job. Today is a special day because it actually marks exactly 1 year of owning this camera. I wanted to give you guys some insights on lessons that I've learned having owned this camera. Just a quick disclaimer, I'm embarrassingly financially illiterate. Yes, I'm good with numbers, I have a background in engineering. However, keeping track of financial numbers and statistics was never intuitively interesting to me. So as I've been a professional and working in this industry for almost 10 years now, last year I finally started tracking my finances a bit more seriously, and I'm happy to share I actually over 10x'd my money with this camera purchase. And I'm not saying that to brag, but I really hope you can learn from my mistakes and apply it to your situation, whether you're doing this professionally or you're doing it simply as a hobby. Because no one wants to go bankrupt, and no one wants to be in a desperate situation. So I actually purchased this camera at a very bad time in my career last year. One of my clients I've been working with for a long time, they delayed my payment for 4 or 5 months. So I had a lot of cash flow problems. And on top of that, another client screwed me over. They didn't pay me. My accountant was going to take legal measures, but we ended up deciding not to do that because it probably would have cost my company more than I would have gained. But despite that, my good friend Kaylee, he recommended that I get a Sony camera because a lot of productions are requiring Sony cameras these days. And as I share with you this video, you'll see that a specific type of client, I would loosely categorize them into corporate, but it made a lot of sense for me to invest in another Sony camera. So I'm going to unpack this camera and show you what I have in here that I've been using for these past 3-day shoot. It came with this handle, which also acts as a grip. It especially comes in handy when you want to do focus magnification and double check your focus. You can also start recording from this handle, and it's very lightweight. It also comes with this viewfinder, which I'm a huge fan of. It's versatile in the sense that when you're shooting outside, you can see very well. You can even open it up and use it as a built-in sunshade. Or in the case of these past 3 days, we've been filming inside, so I completely removed this piece. Then you just have the screen by itself. For this job, I was able to use my shotgun microphone despite having a dedicated audio guy. This did not come included with the camera. I bought it separately, and I use it with all of my Blackmagic cameras as well. It's a high-quality Sennheiser MKE600 microphone. It came with a charger, which is super helpful when you're filming long-form interviews and you don't have to worry about switching batteries. This is the camera itself. It's the Sony FS7 Mark II. It came out 8 years ago, and I bought this exactly 1 year ago. Therefore, it was a 7-year-old camera at the time I bought it. And believe it or not, when this camera first came out, it was $10,000 US for just the body, which was $2,000 more expensive than the Mark I. That's basically the whole kit I have in here. I also have a 256GB XQD card. I bought that separately, but the total price for the body and the media was around $1,100 US, which is crazy because you can't even buy an FX30 with that money. The productions that I've been working on with this camera this past year, we've been shooting alongside an FX9 and an FX3. So in the past, we've also shot this FS7 alongside FX6s. The FS7 cuts together very nicely with all these newer Sony cameras, despite not having autofocus features that the newer camera models have. And most importantly, the image still holds its own. I was a Sony shooter for a long time. It was a system that I started out on. I started out with the Sony NEX5R, then I went to the Sony A7 I, A7 II, A7 III. At that point, I basically gave up on Sony cameras because I didn't want to be a hybrid shooter and I wanted to focus solely on film. These days, 10 to 20% of my jobs require Sony cameras, and that's where this FS7 fits perfectly into my kit. Even though these days I am tempted by the FX3, which is an awesome camera, the FS7 has built-in electronic NDs, and since my Blackmagic cameras all have built-in NDs, I have a hard time going back to cameras that don't have built-in NDs when I'm using them professionally. I also just love old school equipment that withstand the test of time. This FS7, I've taken it in rivers, I've taken it on dangerous mountain trails, and it's every bit as reliable, just like all the other Sony cameras that I've owned in the past. I sold all of my Sony lenses years and years ago, but nowadays I just adapt my vintage lenses. So I have a 35mm, a 50mm, and a 90mm. That pretty much covers all my bases, and for certain jobs we will rent the Sony clinically sharp lenses that in my personal opinion don't have any character and are not visually interesting. However, a lot of times that's just what the job requires. A lot of people will obsess over cameras that are Netflix approved, and they'll hyper-focus on the specs. Are they good enough for Netflix quality? But I just want to let you know that this camera, despite coming out almost 8 years ago, we can still use this camera in productions in a very efficient and effective way. The first client that we shot with this camera was Vice. In the past, I've also used this camera with Discovery Channel. We've also used it for Netflix marketing content. These past 3 days we shot for Bloomberg, and we've also used it for Financial Times. We also used it for event filming for Taipei Blockchain Week. Exactly 1 year later, I more than 10x'd my money. With this camera, I view it as a money-making machine in the sense that I should hold on to it for at least another 2 to 3 years, and I can continue making more money with it. You don't need the newest and greatest camera. For computers and cell phones, many people will say they need to be upgraded every 3 to 5 years. But with all of the camera technology these days, you can hold on to your camera for much, much longer. And in my case, this camera will serve me for well over 10 years since it's been produced. The Sony FS7 is a staple in the doc filming world. I'm very lucky and I'm very blessed to have come from a family that had never had to deal with poverty. And when I graduated from university, I had a high-paying salary and was in the top 1% income bracket. So I haven't had to struggle much financially, except for this last year when I bought this camera. And looking back, I'm glad I did. So thanks to Sony for making this legendary camera, and thanks to Kaylee for convincing me to buy another Sony camera. Even though I'm not as passionate about this Sony camera as my Blackmagics, I simply see it as a business tool. It allows me to work with many more like-minded filmmakers. Thanks for watching. If you'd like to see more videos around finances, that's something that I've struggled with my entire freelance career and I continue struggling with, but I'll continue learning and I hope to share with you my mistakes so that they can also help you with your creative journey. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave a comment below and don't forget to subscribe. Thank you.